everybody, as I am investigating the topic of future of work and trying to really understand what the future holds for all of us, and especially for the younger generation that's going to get pulled into what's coming next, I have with us Dheer Momaya, who is joining us from the United Kingdom. Dheer Momaya is a founder at Jugaad Motion Pictures. He has had many privileges and many titles that he's held. Privilege of being Forbes 30 under 30, really making it to that list at a very, very young age. Also was responsible for India's entry to the Oscars in 2023. And for this, he also won a national award, the hands of the President of India in 2023. So lots of accomplishments and accolades at a very young age. More importantly, a drive and a passion and commitment to make a mark and do something that's unique and authentic. I think that's really a word for the that I would use. Trying to create a mark through authenticity and honesty and integrity. Somebody I've known for many, many years, someone who is a personal favorite for me, someone who's like a family member for me. So Dheer Momaya, thank you so much for being on this conversation and helping us shape the narrative of what the future holds for all of us.
Wow, thank you. That was such a glowing introduction. I feel like maybe I should review my bio through you the next time. But thank you. Yeah.
Well, every word was true and heartfelt. So the as we start, thinking about what the future of work, and this topic, and we go deeper into this, before we jump into like what are the factors and what's going to happen, just to lay the context of this conversation, why as a filmmaker do you think it's even important to keep an eye on the future? How does it affect you, your world, your work?
Very good question. I'm gonna try and be as articulate as possible about the future, even though I don't know if I'm the right authority on what the future could entail. But I think that filmmakers, writers, artists in general have always had to be futurists. One, it comes from the nature of our work because something that I'm writing today is probably only going to come out 4 years later because it takes a year or a year and a half, sometimes 10 years, but on average, a year and a half to write something good. A year and a half of financing, casting, putting the project together, probably a few months of shooting, probably more months of post production, and then marketing, and then the world sees it. So technically, what I'm working on today needs to be relevant 4 years from now. So
Mm.
automatically, just as a creator, I have to put myself in the shoes of an audience that's watching this a few years later. So just the pure nature of our work is sort of futuristic. Then, if you take into account like some of the great sci-fi writers of our time, right? Isaac Asimov, just generally amazing futurists who've predicted so many things in the future in their book, right? George Orwell, just incredible, not only from a sci-fi perspective, but from like societal, structural perspective, human nature. It's because when you start imagining futures, right, you're imagining it based on yourself today and the human experience that you're having today. And I think an artist is only as good as the reflection that they can create of what humanity is today. So if you really are able to tap into the zeitgeist, and if you're really able to tap into the human experience in its purest form at the very moment, and then extrapolate what it could be a few years down the line, then you usually get it right. So sometimes you've seen films in the 1930s or books in the 1920s and even the 1910s that have predicted computers, that have predicted what AI would be, have predicted mobile phones, may not be, designed like this, but have predicted the functionality of it. And then by lieu of that, the impact that it would have on society, right? So I think it's just important for us to continuously think in the future.
Okay, amazing. Okay, I like that analogy of filmmakers as futurists.
Yeah.
Quite complex though, if you're trying to predict consumer patterns a year or 3 or 4 from now, because with short form content, especially a reel I watched maybe last weekend, and if I watch it tomorrow, might not seem funny to me anymore because in a matter of 4 days, I've shifted in my sensibility. So how do you guys keep track of consumer preferences? And it sounds like a pretty complex complex art, if I may call it so. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how you do this, right? So when you try to sort of map consumer behaviors and patterns, what are some of the factors that you think affect how human beings evolve, and how you know how do you look at consumer patterns or behaviors and say, hey, this is how we think, these are some of the factors that are influencing consumer patterns or behavior.
Again, excellent question. I think, like you mentioned, right, while we're living in the age of information, we're also living in the age of amnesia, right? Because there's so much information coming to us at every single second. Like literally, while I'm talking to you right now, my WhatsApps are beeping. You're getting like stock updates. Everything. Your whole life is sort of just playing out simultaneously. Lights are flashing. And I just don't think that the human brain has evolved fast enough to process so much information at the same time, right? Um, and I think that that has led us to having some sense of amnesia. So we keep forgetting things. Like sometimes you'll read an entire Economist article in the morning, and then by the evening, you sort of just, it's left your mind. Maybe it's somewhere in your subconscious, but it's left your mind. I think where we've come to today, and you spoke about reels. The issue is that a lot of technology creators have understood, and so same thing with filmmakers and content creators and influencers, and so have you. Anyone who's creating things that other people have to consume, technology, entertainment, so on, have understood that the human brain has now gotten used to very, very strong dopamine hits. So, how a 30-second reel, the dopamine hit that you get from a 30-second reel will never be the same as reading a 5-minute article, right? So, which is why most young people are consuming news as, short snippets on video rather than reading an entire article from The Economist or from, some from a journalist that's writing a really long piece. Similarly with books, right? Like people just don't read books anymore, which is a very scary thing. Your people read other people's opinions of books
Hmm.
and other people's breakdowns of larger texts, and then that's what becomes their understanding of the information that's been
Are you
provided.
seeing that happen with cinema as well? And are you seeing long form content now going to be sort of condensed to shorter filmmaking formats? Are you seeing now short films sort of taking over? Is that going to happen? Do you see a change there?
Absolutely. I think, when I started off my career in 2014, ideologically, I was already thinking way ahead, and I was like, oh, right now I'm competing as a filmmaker, you compete with television.
Hmm.
As Reed Hastings once said, Netflix competes with sleep, right? Like people fall asleep and, you're competing with sleep. But today, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, you're competing with Instagram, you're competing with games, you're competing with 100 other things that are holding people's attention, right? So how do you create something so original and something so beautiful that even if it takes long for people to get that dopamine rush, for it takes longer for people to get the gratification that they get while watching it, how do you create something that really engages them? And I think that's where really our brain needs to function. And as filmmakers, that's where we really push the boundaries, to sort of predict consumer behavior, because I also do a lot of advertising work. And you're right, predict. Sometimes we sit in rooms with 10, 12 people, client, agency, theorists, everyone together, strategists, and we're all trying to sit together and trying to play out how a consumer 6 months from now, when the campaign goes out, is going to react to it, right? Um, and I feel like there's always some stuff that is subconsciously human. So there's some stuff which is like, some part of buying behavior which will always remain the same. But there's some things that are changing on a day-to-day basis. So it's sort of, obviously data now has started playing a very, very large role in it, because you can see how well your last campaign has performed. You can see how well your last video has performed. Netflix can see how long, how long they've been able to retain their viewer from a number of minutes perspective of how many, minutes someone has watched or how many episodes someone has watched. So based of that, they'll say that their data analytics takes them to a certain place, and then their programming decisions will be directed by that. But I think that that's always challenging, because especially in art, people don't know what they want to consume. They think they know what they want to consume, and they're subconsciously consuming something, but there'll always be something that'll come along which will beat all your data points and then become the most viewed thing, because that's the beauty of art, right? That's the beauty of watching a film or a show. Sure, with the onset of all the streamers, everything has sort of become very homogenized. Even commercials and TVC still at till one point became very, very homogenized. Um, and then people started using Instagram more and watching reels more. So then filmmakers and advertisers and everyone had we had to sort of package ourselves to find an interesting way to bring our communication through, right? So now branded content has become a very, very large part of what was otherwise 5 or 10% of a marketing spend for a brand manager has now become almost 60-70% comes through branded content. It's essentially what the cigarette makers and the alcohol makers did back in the day when they got banned from advertising. They
Surrogate
found
advertising.
subliminal ways of advertising and subliminal ways, and that actually turned out to be more effective
Hmm.
than just having a billboard up of the Marlboro Man.
Sure.
Uh, Marlboro financing, for example, bars in America spending $200 million a year just so that the bar seats in America would be red,
Sure.
the Marlboro color, actually led to a higher growth in sales than just having billboards up, right? Because you're subconsciously getting in there. So I think we're constantly using biology and like studies done on the human brain and things like that, to sort of predict it. But at the same time, highly original ideas uh, are going to be the way forward.
Okay, so you are seeing some sort of shift, but you're saying that in the creative space, it's that idea, it's that one non-predicted force that might come through and just sort of take away all these predictions that you have, and it's take the world by shock. So
Exactly.
it's a future, it's a world where you are trying to sort of keep pace with consumer trends, but you don't really know what might hit. Okay.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about technology, right? Because that is obviously one of the factors that's affecting most industries.
So,
And there's lots of technological implications in filmmaking. Um, Maybe we start with the use of, artificial intelligence in filmmaking, and what sort of tools if are you using any tools, AI related tools in the process of filmmaking, maybe in this actual scripting, in the screenplay, in the visuals, how much AI are you actually using, and where do you see that force shifting to in the next 5 or 7 years?
like from a generative AI perspective, we have started using it. We use it for uh, sometimes research. We use it for uh, copy checking some of our scripts, grammatical checking, stuff that Grammarly otherwise did. Sometimes for concising, we write like a 10-page treatment and we want to get like a half page of it, and that could otherwise take a human being 5 days or maybe 3 days to do multiple versions, come back to it. But here, if you put it into generative AI, they may do a job for you that gets you at least 50 or 60% there, that can then reduce your time, right? Similarly with generative AI image creation, something that we do a lot in advertising specifically, but also in features and film, is pre-visualization, storyboarding, things that would give possible clients or studios or other stakeholders who are not directly involved in the production process, but have a very keen eye on what the end result is going to be, to present to them what the end result could look like. We use generative AI now to create those storyboards, to create some sense of what that end result could look like.
You mean it's
Uh,
like a visual storyboard that you can
yeah,
actually?
visual storyboard. Yeah,
Oh, visual storyboard. Okay.
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
it's easy, right? Otherwise, you needed someone to sit and draw every frame. Now you could just, prompt a generative AI tool with exactly what you want to create, and then they'll create it for you. And I think now the new generation of generative AI that we've had access to is really very strong, right? Similarly with video, we have a couple of times for some of our videos, which are mixed media, which are not directly live action, but are mixed media. We have used generative AI for even creating some sort of animations and stuff like that, right? Which have been helpful. I think in India and specifically for us, it's still a little early stage. We haven't really created complete output, which we're very happy with from generative AI. But it's a matter of time, right? It's a matter of computing speed and stuff like that. That'll help us catch up, and also commercialization of some of the products out there, which are super expensive right now, but which are getting much more democratic to use over the next few years. But the one thing about AI though, and I guess this is somewhat still a romantic in me. Not that I'm ever going to fight it, right? I'm of the generation that you can't fight technology. How much ever I'd like to, I don't fight it. I try to curtail it and curtail my use of it as much as I can, but I don't fight it. And I do know that AI is going to sort of take over, a large part of the cinema creation process. But at the end of the day, AI is ones and zeros, right? And cinema and film and the beauty of it has always been beyond that, because generative AI is always going to take what's out there in the world, use machine learning, use its algorithms to then create the next thing, right? So sure, it'll be vastly different from what's already out there because it's taking from a billion other things, right? The input is a billion things, probably more than what the brain could input. But there is still something magical about when the human brain creates an original idea, creates something that's so beautiful, which I don't think yet has happened on generative AI. Like I also run a music label which we founded last year, which Touchwood has been doing quite well. And you'll probably we'll hear more about it in the next couple of years. But like so many singers now, there's been like generative AI on Drake's voice, there's been generative AI on like beat production. And all of that is great, right? Because it sort of makes it very easy at an early stage for an artist to create a great beat without having to pay a producer a lot of money. But still, when you work with a really, really high quality producer who's bringing a lot to the stage, they may prompt you in a different direction, and they may, through the human collaborative process, they may bring you to a different direction where, sure, it may not be as economically viable, and you may actually create better hits with AI, and, so your end result might be better, but the process of getting there will always remain magical when you're working with humans, and often we say that art is about the process and not the end result. Sure, you want a few hits once in a while that will help pay the bills and, get you the paparazzi and stuff that follows you as a star. But if you're not enjoying the process, the end result is pointless, because the fame comes and goes, and the celebration comes and goes, and you'll have hits and you'll have ups and downs. But as long as the process is strong and the process is inspiring, that's what's going to continue making you want to do better work. So
Okay, so you're saying you're going to enjoy the process, but technology is here. You're using it already.
yeah,
There's no escaping it. It's
there's
only
no
going to
escape.
get better, cheaper, more accessible, more user friendly. So obviously, you're saying that it's going to be all pervasive. You are going to use it in creative industries, right? There's no escaping it.
There's no
Okay.
escaping for
There's no
sure.
escaping it. So now, if there's no escaping it, we're all going to be using these tools. You're going to probably use them in very different ways, but you're going to use them. What have you thought through the ethical considerations of this? Like you mentioned the example of the voice, and with this whole deep fakes going around and people trying to like sound like Amitabh Bachchan, and if you can just sort of generate his voice on a platform, that means many things. Right? It could be good because then you don't have to invite Amitabh Bachchan to your studio to
Yeah,
dub this film in 50 different languages. You can just say, okay, we've got your voice. Now we'll dub it in 300 regional languages or whatever. And, as a producer, you're like, great, this is cost effective. He's happy because he doesn't have to come in and do this laborious work. At the same time, if someone takes the voice, then, so where are you on the ethical considerations of this? And, what's a fine line to toe between, ease of use versus the ethical considerations and that paradigm and that dilemma. What are your thoughts around that?
I mean, I think it's a very good question. Like, if you study like Aristotle ethics or like, Nicomachean ethics or any of those ideas, the first thing is that ethics constantly change, right? The first hypothesis is that, it's in constant change, and the world around you will sort of define it. There'll always be some stuff that, some part of it which will remain constant, but you have to embrace the change. So I think that, an ethical discussion around AI, sure, there'll be legalities around it. The US has already started drafting bills. Like, for example, today, if you use generative AI in image making, if there's no you apart from prompting, if there's no other human element to it, you can't really protect the IP. So you can't say that this is your original IP that you own, because it's taking from a thousand different artists. So like if you tell an AI to like generate something that has a mix of a style between a Rembrandt painting and a Marc Chagall painting, but it is a modern this, and then you create like an album art with that, right? if it's taken from 1,000 different things, it'll be impossible to pinpoint where it's been taken from, right? So you won't be able to say, oh, this is a copy of Rembrandt, you should pay the Rembrandt Foundation something or whatever. So that's that. But if there's been no human involvement in it, you can't call that yours either. So if someone else goes and makes the same thing with the AI and it gets almost a very similar image, you will not be able to sue them for copyright infringement. So I
Mm.
think laws will come around it to protect it, and then the laws, and it's always been a fight between law and ethics and which one comes first and which one sort of leads the other one forward. But
Mm.
I think naturally you'll tend towards something that would protect artists, but there will also be flagrant um, misuse of that, right?
Mm.
I think the biggest issue is that the tool itself is, while you think that it's a means to an end because it'll reduce costs, it'll get you a high quality of work, and it'll do all of that, that's never always the case, right? Like if you look at mobile phones, right? If you told a writer or a director or a filmmaker that you could look at any image in the world by just looking at it in your phone, if you told a filmmaker or a writer or director in the 1950s or 60s that you can get any book, any literary text, any image, anything that your brain could ever want to see, instead of going to a library, instead of flying to a different country, instead of going out and spending years of your life researching it, it can all come on this device. They would be like, oh my god, this is going to change the future of film,
Sure.
everyone is just going to be doing this, like I would make a film 100 times easier and better. But now we're 30 years into this, and you know filming, and it's not like films have gotten much better than they were in the 1960s, right? So
Mm.
sometimes the tools itself make you lazier.
Sure.
They make you, they you don't really utilize them fully. Like I think about myself, like we grew up on Britannica, right? We like had the encyclopedia, so if you wanted to look up something, like if you read about something in a book and you wanted to look it up, you had to go to a library, pick out the Britannica, then look at it, and then be like, oh wow, this is it. Then when Google came in, everyone was like, okay, this is the death of Britannica. Now that you have Chat GPT, people are like, oh, they'll stop using Google. But has it really made your research? Okay, it's made it easier for sure. But
Mm.
has it? And sure, it'll push some scholastic people and like academic people to really use it to the best of their ability and push technology forward and push mankind forward. But most people will just use it to go online and scroll Instagram, right?
Mm.
So I think that that's the similar thing with AI. Like while it's going to give some really, really talented people who are driven the tools to make something more effective, it's going to make most of the creators, which is 90% of the creators, which are
Lazy.
anyways have laziness inside them, it's going
Mm.
to make them more lazy.
Mm.
Uh, and in fact, it's going to give you more excuses not to do, the work that you need to. So
Mm.
when you talk about the future of work, I think while AI will make work easy, and there's some, a very good question that you sent in the list before was, some futurists say that humans will not need to work anymore, right? You're going to
Sure.
take work away from humans, and that's why they'll be have all the time in the world for creativity. But that's never really the case, because you have that today as well. Most of us, especially people who come from privilege, theoretically, you wouldn't need to work every day of your life. You could just spend your time on being creative, on helping people, on creating things. But you don't, right? Some people would still just end up going for a lunch and getting drunk with their friends and indulging in basic hedonism as a way of escape, rather than using their brain to be creative. So I think that the two, while it's a tool to the next step, it's and you think it's a tools to the means to the to an end and to the end of work, and to do
You don't see that
different kinds
happening.
of work, it sometimes drives you away from that. So I feel like for young creators, it's going to be very, very difficult.
Okay.
um, like most good filmmakers, if you see, at least from the generation before mine, and at least what I try to push myself towards, if you see the amount of books they've read, not heard, not
Yeah.
audibles that
Sure.
they've listened to, not podcasts of other people describing books, but actually spent hours of their time reading the book and taking the text in, that has reduced by about 90%. And you can see
Sure.
that in the kind of films that get created today. And that's why, like, they say that the end of original music, the end of original film is near. The end, now they're calling television, in the television world, they're calling it the end of the Sopranos to Succession era, right?
Mm.
Of like very, very, innovative television ideas that, blew the world apart, which came from literally one studio. But they're calling it at the end because people are just now repurposing what's already worked, and that's what AI is going to do as well, right? It's just going to take
Yeah.
what's already worked and find a way to put a new sheen to it, a different context to it, and then give it to a consumer to view. So where is originality going to come from? I think that that is where really, if AI, if generative AI manages to build in that originality, then I think the world changes. But
Mm.
till now, it's always been a repurposing rather than an original idea.
Hmm. And also, there's no proprietary generative AI, right? It's all
Yeah,
going to be like we all have access to the same thing. So there's no competitive advantage for anybody, right? You as a filmmaker have the same AI tools that everyone else has. So,
exactly.
that kick has to still come from the originality or the creativity of the developer or the content maker.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. And I love the fact that you don't think that people are just going to sit around and do nothing and just you know so while away their time or channelize their time into creative endeavors, because we
yeah,
could technically there is a significant population that could still do that now. Definitely the world's billionaires and trillionaires could very
yeah,
well choose to do that, but they don't choose to do that. So
yeah,
that's just an intrinsic human trait, and that's not going to fundamentally go away.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay, cool.
So,
Let's shift from creating content, which and your views are very unique and interesting on the creative on the creating side. Let's move to a little bit to distribution, right?
right.
Uh, I come from a video cassette era, right? And obviously from the video cassette era, we've seen it come a long, long way.
Yeah.
To where sleep is now competing with Netflix. What's going to happen? Where do you see streaming move to? Is where is the content consumption going to happen? Are movie theaters going to still be around? Because every couple of years there'll be a conversation around, oh, the theaters all going to shut down. Who's going to go to theater? And then
Yeah.
you'll have like one big blockbuster. It's like cross 200 days, 300 days, and then you're like, oh, we believe in the world of like physical because it's community experience, etc. So you're constantly toggling this dialogue, right? So what's happening in terms of streaming as in from the way you see it?
Well, again, excellent question. I think it's cyclical, right? Viewing patterns and human behavior is cyclical. It never follows one pattern for a very long period of time. Like when moving pictures were discovered, or invented, if you may say so, people thought it would be the end of theater, right? Physical theater, like plays, because you were like, the scalability of film is so much more, where you can reprint multiple copies and shoot it once and then have thousands, or earlier hundreds, then thousands, then millions, and then billions of people
Mm,
view one little thing, right? And that was on film. It was 35 film. It was still tedious. It was, it
mm,
needed, for example, gelatin. So it needed literally animal fat to create cinema. So it was a very physical thing. But they said this is the end of theater, right? So film was going to be the end of theater. Theater survived. Film survived. Then television came and said this is going to be the end of film, because who's ever going to go to the cinema anymore if they're giving you moving pictures at home?
mm,
But it sure, for a couple of years it took a big beating when color TV arrived.
mm,
But then people still went back to the cinemas and watched TV. When streaming came, people said that no one's going to watch TV anymore, nor is anyone going to go to the cinema, because it's video on demand, which means you can pick what you want to watch, where you want to watch. This will truly kill cinema. And it did. The pandemic came where people could not leave their house anymore. And they said, this is truly the end of cinema. And this is truly the end of theater, because now you've really changed habits, right? I'm in the UK right now. Every single play and every single cinema for a good movie and for a good play is sold out for the next 4 to 6 months
sure.
throughout the winter, because people there's a fatigue that people have reached sitting at home and watching endlessly content versus going out, taking the tube or taking a train, or it's all very expensive, right? Mind you, you have to find parking and you have to find a babysitter for your kid, and it's all a big hassle, right? So Netflix came in to disrupt that and say you don't need to do any of that. Let your baby sleep next to you while you just watch everything that's in the cinema at home. But
Mm.
people are still choosing to go through that whole thing, go through the effort, go there, watch something in the cinema, go have a coffee or a drink or something
How
after,
do you
or
think it's
dinner
going to
after, and
shift?
then come home.
How do you think it's going to shift in the next 5 or 10 years? Do you see this shifting?
I think people are going to go back to cinemas. It's happening, and people are going back to theater. Like, just if you just look at the UK, the amount of look at NMACC in India, right? Like, Mamma Mia and all of these shows were completely sold out. People want a
Okay.
human
So,
experience
so you're saying
and a
people
big
want the
screen
human
experience.
experience, and the human experience is here. So you don't see the theater
I,
going.
I I honestly see it the opposite way. I think that streaming, the amount of fatigue that people have from just binging content, they're going to want a more curated experience that comes from the cinema. They're going to want a bigger screen experience that comes from the cinema. And more than that, there's a fatigue of choice. Today, when you go on Netflix, how often are you just like scrolling through to decide what you want to watch, right? Like you just constantly scroll through. So if you see in the US already, and I see the US being always slightly early adopters to viewing patterns. They were the earliest adopters to SVOD, which is subscription VOD platforms, like Netflix and Prime and stuff like that. Now they've become the earliest adopters to AVOD, which is advertising VOD platforms, where you pay less premiums and you watch ads as well. And then they're also the foremost in TVOD, which is transactional VOD, where you just pay for what you want to watch. So if you want to watch a single title, you just pay $2 and you rent that, right? Now, Netflix says that why would you do that when you can pay $10 and
Have unlimited
have
access.
an unlimited amount? And sure, for a large part of the market, which is price sensitive, they would do that. But in the US, TVOD numbers over the last 2 quarters have just shot off the roof. Because even though people have Netflix subscriptions, they're just so fried of watching things that when something new comes out, the producers like me and the distributors, like the people that we work with, they've said, let's not sell it to Netflix immediately. Let's put it on TVOD. Let people have to pay $2 per view, and
Mm.
they will come to watch it. And that's exactly what's been happening. Similarly with sports, right? Pay-per-view is something that's massive in the US. It's
Mm.
still not hit India completely. There will be a few things this year that will be pay-per-view. But pay-per-view in the US, NFL, all of these big ticket, sports IPs and events have all moved to pay-per-view. Boxing has always been that, right? Like hundreds of millions of dollars coming from pay-per-view. So I think that it's going to sure streaming will always exist and will always dominate the market, but the growth rate that you've seen in streaming will taper off. And eventually there will be a nicer growth arc for certain types of spectacular movies, certain type of spectacular theater, as well as TVOD, transaction VOD platforms.
Okay, okay, all right. So content remains king, and it seems like you have good content thrown out there, and then you're going to see streaming patterns really depend on how spectacular and how
Yeah,
much the demand for this content is. Okay, so you
exactly.
don't see theater going out of fashion. You're saying people still create that human experience, and it's only going to grow as people use more and more technology to for their everyday work. Okay,
Absolutely.
cool. Okay, great. Are you seeing any changes in the way you make movies, like in terms of the just the filmmaking model and the studios, and how is that going to shift in the next 5 or 10 years? What is going on from a filmmaking producer perspective?
It's been, really challenging over the last 5, 10 years, and it's continuing to be challenging because I don't think ever in the history of entertainment has there been such a monopolistic
Mm,
buying and distributing system
mm,
where now you're really left to five, 3 to 5 eventual buyers. And
mm,
as there's more consolidation at large studio level or large now tech level, where you have literally Amazon that's bought MGM, you have Warner that's made this massive acquisition. With Warner, that's HBO and Warner that have merged with Discovery. Then you have Disney that's acquired Fox. So you're having massive, Geo and Disney in India, possibly Z and Sony. All of these continuous big ticket consolidations at a top level are making it a little difficult because for the first time in history, you've taken away agency from the producer. Because earlier the producer had various different ways, or distributor had various different ways to monetize content, right? You had free TV, pay TV, theatrical, SVOD, TVOD. You had multiple different buyers, you had regional players, you had major international players, you had local players, and you could really break up rights and sell it and monetize your content differently through various different ways. And each different format could give you a different value, right? So, for example, if your film did really well, I don't know, like Japanese people really loved your film, it could work really well in theaters, and then the TV channels in Japan could pay you money, and then a SVOD platform in Japan could pay you money.
Sure.
Today, when Netflix acquires your film,
All
they
rights.
capture all of that value, right? So why did, throughout time, like if you look at the most, they say the most valuable actor in the world, net worth value, and now it's Shah Rukh Khan, but at one point was Jerry Seinfeld, because when the Seinfeld show came out and it was localized in so many different languages, they had back end points as producers. Jerry Seinfeld and the entire company had back end points in the IP itself. So the IP was part owned by them. So when it did well on US networks, it was great. When it was re-licensed by US networks, they made money.
They made
When
money.
they sold Asia rights to Star Network, they made money. When it got resold, they made money. So the residual points are essentially what made film such a high risk, high reward business. So
Mm.
you would be okay as a producer taking a very risky bet and
But
making
see,
very
now
few
you
things.
sell everything off. You sell it off the bat to one. Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you see this shifting in the future? Are you seeing this balance of power shift in the next 5 or 10 years, or you think it's going to get more and more consolidated in the hands of even fewer people?
The way it's looking now, it's looking at more consolidation and more power leaving us. Recently, there was the WGA strike. Again, I take the US market as being the front runners because they're the most organized entertainment market in the world today. Um, and the most developed and the most mature. The WGA, which is the Writers Guild of America, and the Actors Guild, which is the SAG-AFTRA, both went on strike at the same time last year because they were like, we need to bring back power to us, right? So there was eventually it was the longest strike in Hollywood history. It almost literally led to a drought in the entertainment industry. People didn't know what they were going to watch next. Like streamers didn't know what they were going to put out next at some point, and major studios were like, we're going to see a few months. We're not going to be able to put out anything in a couple of years. So it was a real challenging time, and they really held their ground. And eventually a compromise was reached, which was somewhere in between, and it was literally battling AI, right? Like writers battling AI, actors battling AI, image rights, all
Mm.
of these small things which studios were just usurping otherwise all these last few years, which now they're trying to bring back agency. So I think it feels like, those last remnants of revolution, which, may stick or may not stick. It really depends on how hungry creators are to put out stuff, right? If there's a way to hold out and to really um, to hold ransom the studios, there may be a way to fight back, but I don't really see that. I think that the power is going to go to them. I just think that eventually, because it's, considering that we'll all be in free markets, 10 years from now, the consumer will decide what they want to watch. So if a studio, and now the studios are also tech companies, which was never the case earlier, studios were always content, film creators and IP creators. Now it's tech and studios mingling
Combined.
together in this grotesque ideology of profit and art.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, Content is going to get more homogenized,
Hmm.
and viewers are going to realize it. I hope viewers will eventually realize it. I feel it, and I think that I'm an early, consumer. Like I used to watch a lot of Netflix when Netflix just came out. People were like, oh, who's going to get a Netflix subscription? I was
Hmm.
like the first person to get it. I was
Hmm.
also the first person to let go of it, right? Where I was like, I don't need it anymore. Like if I want to watch a movie, I'll watch a movie. If I
Hmm.
want to watch a series, maybe I'll watch a series, but it has to be something that really speaks to me, and I'm happy to do pay-per-view. I don't want to pay subscription fees. So like I think that eventually people will come to this, but again, I don't know. I can only talk about myself, and I'm again a little bit of a hopeless romantic when it comes to films and cinema because I grew up, my generation grew up on a different era.
As you see, you're going to see more and more consolidation,
Yeah.
and whether we like it or not, it looks like the power is going to be controlled by a few studios.
Oh
What
yeah.
might happen is that instead of five, maybe it'll move to 15, 20, 30. Right? If there are more and more people coming into this space, then maybe the forces of capitalism sort of even out because
Yeah. Yeah.
right now it's too concentrated in too few hands.
And also studios are losing their grip over viewers, right? Earlier it was only few like if you wanted to be entertained, you would go to watch a movie in the cinema. They had a monopoly.
Mm.
Today, you'll just put on YouTube and you'll watch like some influencer's video for like 2 hours and you're entertained. You can watch a 1.5 hour long vlog from a major influencer and you're entertained. It's
Sure.
costed that guy literally $200 to make it, and a studio is spending $100 million to make a film.
Mm.
So how do you compare? How do you compete? It becomes, earlier studio thought that you have to spend at least $5 million to get 1.5 hours of a person's attention, right?
Mm.
Today, literally a guy spending $100 will get you that attention. So
Okay, okay.
yeah.
Okay. It sounds like it's pretty complex. It sounds like difficult to predict, and it sounds like too many forces at play.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you think the consumer is, is king. Sometimes you think, oh, but actually it's content that will have the power. And then you say, actually, wait, it's not neither the consumer nor the content. It's actually the person who's distributing this content. This is an age-old debate in the field of cinema, and it looks like it's, these forces are just sort of interplaying with each other.
True.
Um, and you don't know whether it's content consumer or now these distribution companies that at least for now seem to really have this consolidated power. Okay, let's shift a little bit to policy making. I don't know if you have any thoughts on regulation and policy making when it comes to this world, because you talked about the strike, and it sort of ended on some sort of compromise, but no one really, I feel like they could go back and strike again. And it's I don't think it's, there's been no real formal legislation or governance or policy making in this space. Where do you think policy making needs to evolve to, and like, do you have a view on on this whole like AI usage and writers getting redundant, and what should they be doing in terms of policy making, from your perspective?
Uh, you know, I am not I'm not very big on advocacy because it's a very I mean I'm me personally, like I know a lot of my friends who are advocates in the space, but I think it's a very academic approach that you need to have. Like you really need to study what the impact is, the sociological impact is going to be, and you really need to give it academic thought. But just purely from a producer perspective, um, I think that regulation in AI and policy in AI is going to be imperative because especially with, like, for example, if you just look at social media, right? Social media has gone unregulated for so many years now, and if you look at the mental health impact it's having on young kids, it is immense, right? Like there is no doubt that social media at a young age, that like it's proven beyond doubt now. There's MIT Media Labs, there's a whole bunch of reports that especially from the age of 13 to 18, the negative impact of social media on the socio, like
Sure.
social ability and understanding that children have of the world is just immense, right? Like it's scary. So if you take that same thing and you put that into hyper extrapolation of what AI is going to do and AI tools are going to do and how they're going to, just engage you on another level. I think that if that goes unchecked, we're really going to reach a place where it's going to get tricky. We're going to sort of lose control over it. And I don't mean from a dystopian sci-fi perspective of robots are going to take over the world, right? Sure,
Yeah.
there's some possible future, of multiple permutation combinations and decision tree making that humans will do that could lead to that. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the very, obvious future that's ahead of us. Um, it's going to go unchecked. And in the case that it goes unchecked and unregulated, it's going to be a very scary place because
Mm.
you're not going to know what's real. Anyways, today people don't know what's real, right? Just WhatsApp groups. Think about it. Like my nani, who's number one source of information today is WhatsApp.
Mm.
100 groups and her 20 friends who WhatsApp forward her things, and she literally spends all her time doing that. For her, WhatsApp is real. Like
Sure.
she the other day sent me a photo of not the other day. This was actually a few years ago. Barack Obama when he was still president, and he had there was probably something that he was looking at his phone or something like that. Someone had morphed a giant god like
Uh,
Tirthankar Bhagwan or whatever onto that, and she looked at that and she like, look, even Barack Obama prays to a giant god. Now, I'm not saying like, that's funny. I laughed obviously when I saw that, but
okay.
people are actually believing this. And if you put that, you put that same thing into a young person's hand, you see the amount of deep fakes being created of celebrities,
Mm.
in the pornographic space.
Mm.
Who's going to know what's real? Anyways, it's all augmented. As you go further augmented, you lose sense of that reality. It's just going to get scary. So I think that policy definitely, specifically on deep fakes, specifically on things like this, on creating falsified information.
Mm.
So, like, if you look at politics, right, like social media has clearly Facebook and Meta, and if you see, he was getting grilled. Zuckerberg was getting grilled by the Congress just before his last set of results were published, and they were blockbuster results, and his stock price sort of shot up. But he was getting grilled in Congress on the impact that Facebook has had on elections, right, globally,
Yeah,
which is again such a scary thing because misinformation spread by certain political ideologies and
sure.
political campaigns has impacted voting. So you extrapolate that and put that in young people's hands. It's impossible to regulate.
So you're saying that this it's scary, and obviously what we are seeing is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah,
And you would say that some form of policy making and regulation is critical. Okay,
absolutely.
let's shift to the last section of the conversation, which is around skill building, right? Because eventually, like we're studying the future to just sort of understand what should a young person do to be future proof
Yes.
his career, and sort of. So in terms of skilling, from a filmmaking or for just or broadly, if you'd like to speak from the creative space, what kind of skilling would you advocate somebody young does to be ready for a career in the creative arts?
Read books. There
Read.
is nothing.
You're
Read.
going back in the future.
Yeah, it is. It is. The first of all, most future is retro future, right? Read books like physical books, not Kindles, not on your phone, not screens, like
Mm.
reduce screen time. Read
Okay.
books. Be because at the end of the day, what is film, right? Film or books or any literature or any fiction or any documentary or anything has to be a representation of the human experience. If you're just going to sit in a room and look at a screen the whole day, you're never going to understand the human experience. You're
Mm.
going to understand someone else's interpretation of human experience, and then you're going to write something based of someone else's interpretation. So if you're not out there in the world experiencing it, seeing how the sun feels on a cold day, seeing how the sun feels on a warm day, seeing how a flower smells, like for example right now I'm in this room and we're doing this call, there's like blue color beautiful lilac color flowers outside, right, in this thing. Now, if I'm going to spend all my time in here and if I'm going to look online what that lilac looks like and do, AI will tell me what it smells like, what it looks like, I'm never going to really experience it. So, how am I going to recreate that for you, right, as a viewer? So, similarly, like if I look at authors like Nabokov or the script or even Ayn Rand or sometimes it's a lot to read like 1,000-page book, right? You could get the idea in 100 pages, but when you read the way they describe a scene, how a scene opens, how the leaves move, how the sunlight falls on it, the rustle of the sound, it's a very very deeply immersive experience. A lot of filmmakers say, oh, when you watch other films, that's how you educate yourself. Sure, that's part of it, but it's only when you read you really educate yourself, because when you're reading, you're forced to use all your imaginative power to visually create images of what text is giving you. And that's what cinema really is, right? You
Mm.
write a script, and then when you're directing it, you have to take the words and visually give it hope, right? So the colors that you use, the tonality that your character will speak, the lighting that you use, whether it's moody, whether it's
Mm.
bright, whether it's high key, all of that is going to define the end,
Yeah.
the way the end consumer uses it. So if you
Okay.
don't read, it's impossible to create.
Okay,
Uh,
I like that answer a lot.
yeah,
Stick to the tangibles and stick to that, and a medium that really compels you to think visually and then create that visual in your head. Okay,
yeah.
that's very beautiful. In terms of just last two questions here. When you think of the artistic space and cinema and theater and advertising, all of this, are you seeing careers that will completely get destroyed? Like, are you seeing careers that are going to be annihilated? Specific functions and jobs? And are you seeing new jobs emerge where you're like, hey, man, this doesn't exist today, or it's sort of beginning to emerge, but I see that in the next 5 or 7 or 10 years, these will be distinct categories of job functions in advertising or cinema? Is there anything like that that comes to mind?
I think every job is a threat if you're not good at your job,
Hmm.
right? Every single aspect of it. If you're an advertiser and you're a copywriter or you're a designer, if you're in film, if you're a writer, if you're a actor, if whatever your piece of craft is that you're dedicating and that you're bringing to the process, if you're not going to upskill yourself continuously, if you're not going to read books, if you're going to if you're going to stagnate your understanding of the world and your ability to create, you will be obsolete because AI will get smarter than you. The only way to combat that is to get smart yourself.
Mm.
It's to push yourself to learn more, to read more, to have more inputs in your own process, to then put outputs, right? If you remain a consumer rather than a creator, like for example, I've deleted Instagram. I don't have Instagram on my phone. I don't have Facebook. I don't have YouTube. I don't
Mm.
have any social media app, no Snapchat, nothing. I don't, never. Just the
Wow.
last 6 months, I haven't even opened Instagram. My team, if in fact if something needs to get posted, they may go and post it.
Sure.
Earlier I should still download it, post it, and then get out, but I've just been zero because as soon as you become a consumer rather than a creator, you're going to lose out. I can feel it, like you just start losing sharpness, especially easy consumption. If I'm reading Shaw, I have The Economist, I have like certain apps, stuff on my phone that I still do in my time when I have free time. But uh it's always in-depth reading. It's not fast reading because if I don't have that, it's going to be impossible for me to compete.
Mm.
Another thing is boredom. Embrace boredom. Today this is the thing that Dar keeps telling me. She sees me sometimes when we're if we're in the car, if we're stuck in traffic, if we're doing something, I'll automatically pick up the phone and start doing something. But like the best ideas come from being bored. The best ideas come not from an idle mind, so not from just sitting around doing nothing or being like high or drunk or something like that. But it actually comes from that moment when your mind is active, when you're ready to race and you want something. So you're not lazy and tired and hungover, but you're like you want something, but there's nothing to give you. That's when your brain is going to start working.
Mm.
So one, obviously embrace boredom, but I do think that if you don't upskill yourself every single day, you will be obsolete. As simple as that.
Okay, so
Every single component is at threat.
okay, I love that. So embrace boredom, read a lot of books, and know that your job is at threat. So
Yeah,
continue to upskill because if you don't do it, someone else will, and that someone else is now an even scarier force called AI,
yeah,
and
yeah.
AI is going to catch up with you but if you keep upskilling, then you might be able to combat it and might be able to beat it in many ways.
Yeah. And then you asked what a new job could be, right? Like if you constantly upskill yourself, you may, even if AI takes over everything, they'll still need prompters, right? They'll still need people. I mean, the system will still need someone to oversee it and to bring in some amount of depth to it and to, like for example, I have people in my office who are, I'm not, I need to upskill myself a little bit with that, but who are really good prompters, like when you give a prompt to generative AI, it's not a one line prompt, it's a whole paragraph and then a whole paragraph after that
There
and
are
then a whole
workshops now
paragraph
for this.
after
There are
that.
workshops that teach you how to write a smart prompt or whatever. So,
Exactly.
okay, so prompters you think will be a new category.
Prompters I think will be a new category. Generally I think anything in technology, anything that around AI development, programming, all of that will be new. But I think I really do think that for a new category of work is going to be people who are uh, non-technology natives, right?
Okay.
So like the future is tribal, right? If you look at if and this is a very interesting futurist who I met who helped Marvel. There was that movie Wakanda, Black Panther, where
Mm,
they reimagined an African future
sure.
where they use tribal, like they use completely tribal designs and tribal ideologies to imagine what the future would look like, and it was beautiful. And that's what truly the future also is, and that's what the futurist who helped them create that told me when I met her, was that the future tribal. And literally I was sitting there and I was wearing like a white kurta-ish thing, and talking to her, and she was like, look at you, you speak proper English. In fact, you speak better English than you probably speak Indian languages, because I told her that. You've studied abroad, you've done everything, you watch American shows, you watch everything, but why are you wearing a sort of kurta thing?
Mm.
Because you're embracing your own tribal history.
Roots and background. Yeah.
Yeah. So the future, and if you see a lot of futurists, they'll have tribal tattoos. You'll see a lot of futures where there's like tribal elements around, because we will study what our ancestors did to create our future. Today, it's all homogenized into one Western idea of thinking, wearing suits, wearing this, but that is going to change. And early adopters will feel it initially, but eventually the whole world will follow through.
Okay, I think what I'm getting a sense of is like you, while we've got to keep pace with the future and embrace technology and AI, etc., you still got to hang on to your roots, hang on to traditional methods, hang on to the books, because
Yeah,
it is that, you know, legacy that we have that's really going to help you differentiate as the future unfolds in front of us.
absolutely.
Okay, terrific. Dheer, this was amazing. Thank you so much. Fascinating insights. I love the way you look at the world. I love how you've accumulated so many different perspectives and then you're able to narrate them in a condensed interview, because as you spoke, I could see glimpses of so many different experiences and conversations that you've probably had over the years that made this
Yeah,
conversation so rich. So thank you once again for doing this. And I look forward to weaving a lot of your thoughts into the book and
same
obviously
thing.
seeing you very, very soon. Thank you so much, Dheer, for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.